Google has now lost the second major antitrust lawsuit brought against it, with many of you probably recalling they also lost one early last year pertaining to the Google's App Store. But the second one, which I believe was brought by the Trump administration, is significantly larger, as it has now been found that Google is indeed a monopoly and acting in a monopolistic manner, as we can see here. Google is a monopolist and has acted as one to maintain its monopoly. It has violated Section 2 of the Sherman Act. That is, of course, the Sherman Antitrust Act from 1890. And the violation they are talking about here is specifically a collaboration between Google and creators of various devices, where Google will pay them a share of the advertisement revenue, and in return, the device creators will make sure that Google is the default search engine on their devices. This has, of course, given Google an absolutely enormous advantage over its competitors. Long forgotten about alternatives is probably a better term for them, really, as Google owns like 90 to 95% of the market. So coming pre-installed on a device is, of course, an absolutely enormous advantage for Google, as the majority of end users never actually bother changing the default search browser. Why would they? They're not particularly interested in it. It's not like Google has a particularly negative reputation with the common man either. And as long as the little funny beepy box gives you the response you expected to, nobody really cares. Except, of course, for the fact that it has established an absolutely ludicrously powerful corporate entity. Now, what can be done about that is, of course, the big question here, as the Code 2 on monopolizing trade, a penalty shall be punished by a fine not exceeding $100 million. Yeah, that ain't gonna do much against Google. So there is going to be, have to be put forward a different remedy here. Now, obviously, Google is going to appeal this, duh, and there is also the third major antitrust lawsuit going ahead against Google. This one was the one launched by the Biden administration and probably isn't going to come to a fruition for another year, 2, 3, possibly, as this shit does take absolute ages. But what is important here, though, is that Google is now a monopolist. Now, here's the weird thing. The courts declined to declare Google's control over the search market as a monopoly, despite admitting that they own 90% of overall devices and 95% of the searches on mobile devices. This, according to the court, is not enough to call them a monopoly, which is technically correct, but, well, we really do need to expand our definition of monopoly here, because, see, in an ideal world, a monopoly is supposed to be someone who has more or less exclusive control over a particular commodity or a trade in some form, right? And, of course, you shouldn't punish success. If a product is simply so much better than everybody else's that it reaches like 95% market share, then okay, there might be an argument that you could put forward that this is simply the fruits of that success. I don't think you can make that convincingly with Google, mind you, but there is an argument to be made there. However, the problem is, of course, that what we are selling here is something ephemeral. It is information. It is practically reality. And normally, there are rules and regulations that are supposed to stop this. There are regulations in the US, and indeed most of the civilized world, that are trying to stop companies from becoming the absolute dominant forces in their marketplace. These rules, however, have not been implemented well, or at all, frankly, allowing companies like Google and its parent company Alphabet to own so much power over how we see the world via things like search engines as to make everything else virtually irrelevant. To put it like this, let's say, again, that Google does indeed own 90% of the searches made across all devices. That means that if you have 10 people around the table and they all decide to Google what the moon is made out of, if 9 out of 10 of those results comes back cheese, then the moon is made out of cheese. And the only question that remains to be asked is what kind of cheese. It is simply far more powerful. Like, having a monopoly, or as close to as possible, of a search engine is simply a lot more dangerous and important than having a monopoly over steel or coal or anything else that the regulations were initially intended to deal with, as again these were written back in 1890. Nobody could have imagined back then that somebody could actually achieve a 9 out of 10 majority in deciding what truth is. And of course, there would be pushback against such an obvious coup, of course, duh, but it wouldn't be that obvious, wouldn't it? And Google has long since now, for years and years, provably so, been massaging the algorithm to make sure that certain people reach the top and certain other people do not. Hell, I'm on YouTube. The algorithmic massage on this platform is off the goddamn charts. So, what can actually be done here? Well, see, that's the big problem. So, a lot of the evidence, by the way, the plaintiff accused the Google of systematic destruction of document, as Google had a, to be fair, long-standing habit, or well, doctrine, of actually deleting chat messages. Now, even after they were told to stop doing that, they continued to do so for a couple more years, until finally a motion was moved against them to force them to stop. Google had also been doing several scummy things, like adding in lawyers, for example, to internal emails so as to get attorney-client privilege, or sending out training guides to avoid things like antitrust keywords, and to thus avoid being easily searchable and discovered by any any antitrust actions taken in the future. Google knew what it was doing here, there's no real doubt about it. Can you prove it? Well, apparently not, but the rest of us can absolutely see it. So, what can be done? Well, already, mind you, this is a bit of a blow due to the fact that all of the major search engines are currently beginning to pivot toward artificial intelligence. There was, this is slightly unrelated, but Dell announces job cuts, plans to lay off nearly 12,500 employees. 10% of its workforce. Holy shit! The tech industry is still getting butchered. Why? Well, as part of the company's broader effort to pivot towards artificial intelligence. Yes, indeed. See, here's the thing. The majority of tech jobs are endangered right now. The majority of tech jobs are going to be gone within 20, 30 years, 50 at the absolute most. The tech professional will be as good as extinct. There will still be some people working on the AI that has replaced them, but the very fact that Dell feels comfortable slicing off 12,000 people right now with AI in its current state, imagine how many jobs are going to disappear in 10 years' time. If you are currently getting an education in a tech profession, reconsider. Or simply become the absolute best person in that field you can possibly imagine. Otherwise, you are looking at some pretty harsh times ahead, I can pretty much guarantee that. But to bring this back onto the Google point, every search engine is right now looking at artificial intelligence as the next great leap forward, as it in all due likelihood is for, well, damn near every single industry on goddamn Earth, frankly. And so, Google getting hammered by fines and antitrust measures right now could be severely damaging to the company's efforts to move into that new market and try to re-establish their monopoly, as this will upset the entire cart in essence. There is also the possibility that far, far bigger moves than a $100 million fine will be brought against the company. As if you do indeed now, okay, so first and foremost, all of these treaties with these various devices must be ended as they are now illegal. Well, you know, appeals, etc., but you get the general drift of the idea. This alone will then make the devices go, okay, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna like set up like an option screen? It's like, hey, these are all of your search engines. Pick one. Okay, how many do you include? How many do you bring up? Like, what is the reason for not bringing up this one, and so on? But this won't really damage Google that much because Google already has that brand recognition. It is already Google. As the document indeed mentions, it is practically synonymous with web searchers. So clearly, you are going to need to do something much, much grander than that if you wish to actually attempt to break up this monopoly. There have already been whispers that there might be attempts to try and break up Google, and if the Trumpalophagus wins this election, and you know what, I am growing somewhat uncertain as, oh my god, the Kamala Harris campaign has been a tour de force demonstration in the power of propaganda. Goebbels himself would be proud at what that woman has pulled off. No shit, it has been remarkable to watch, and the usage of the younger generation as the happy little incompetent stooges that they are, oh god, it's actually a bit of a masterwork, really. But again, we're wandering off topic here. The Trumpalophagus is not a friend of Google. The vast majority of tech workers donate to his opponents. The vast majority of tech companies actively support his opponents. And I do believe that the Trumpalophagus might have learned a lesson or two from the previous time he was in the White House. And moving to break up a company like Google, well, in all due honesty, it is something that should have been done a very long time ago. It should never have been allowed to grow to the size that it is today. Again, we have rules and regulations that are supposed to prevent companies growing too large and thus being able to exert undue and monopolistic influence over its competitors by, for example, saying, hey, you, the mobile phone company, I'll pay you $1 billion to make me the default search browser. What's the competitor going to do about it? What's Firefox going to do about that? Nothing. And even if somebody, again, managed to create an alternative so good, so amazing, that it simply blew Google out of the water, the company is earning hundreds of billions every year. They could simply go to that person and go, I'm going to buy you out. And unless that person is literally Jesus Christ, who has a personal fetishized love interest with his project, he is going to sell. As there are very, very, very few people that aren't going to give in to a few billion bucks. And hey, you can always make the argument that there's the nice people out there, the ideologues, the people, oh no, I would never. Yes, you would. Yes, you would. Everyone has a price. That is simply a part of the human condition. And even if you could find a unicorn which doesn't have a price, well, Google owns 95% of the market, of the search market, of the distribution of information market. How the hell are you even going to let anyone know that your product exists without Google? Hell, Google could very easily go, brilliant new product, source of malware, hint hint, etc, etc. Not to mention all of the other things that Google owns, like YouTube, for example, or emails. Oh god, Google Documents, which is used by countless major companies. Google's influence in the world of business is enormous. And therein lies the true problem. Google as a company, and Alphabet as even greater of a company, simply holds far too much power and authority to be allowed to remain at the size that it is, and should never have allowed to reach that size in the first place. By and large, whenever you have companies approaching anything even remotely close to 90% market share, you've messed up along the way. And now, rather draconian actions are probably going to have to be taken to remedy it, and preferably it isn't just going to hit Google, because if you take down Google, in all due likelihood, well, you're still going to have Apple, etc. It is going to require, to actually truly solve this problem, is going to require a major restructuring of the American tech industry in general. It is going to be an absolute ridiculous bloodbath, and it is going to make firings like this look like a drop in the ocean. And there is one of the problems as well. If, let's say, the Trump office goes through with this major restructuring, he is going to lose probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs in the tech industry, which isn't going to look particularly good for him either, although, considering the current temperature, I do suspect a fair few might actually be cheering for that outcome. But anyways, this is now 2 losses for Google, with a third, hopefully, to come very, very soon. And hopefully, there will be some actual measures taken beyond a fine, which one of the world's largest goddamn corporations could simply just shrug off on a week's worth of income. But again, this problem is really goddamn huge, and will require a really goddamn huge solution. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.